Estamos aqui mais um episódio do Trilados. Estou aqui de novo para chamar vocês para assistir esse episódio incrível que a gente gravou, que é aquelas coisas que são as coisas boas das redes sociais, né? A gente consegue juntar pessoas do outro lado do mundo para poder falar do que a gente gosta e com pessoas que a gente achava que nunca ia ter contato, né? Então hoje a gente gravou com o Matt Dixon, que é um cara que eu sou fã, cito o podcast dele, cito o livro dele várias vezes aqui no podcast, já citei no meu Instagram também, acompanho muito o trabalho dele, já li os livros dele, né? E gosto muito da forma como ele conduz os atletas dele. Então ele já treinou muitos atletas profissionais, ele tem como técnico mais de 350 vitórias de Ironman e meio Ironman, com atletas como Chelsea Sodaro, como Chris Lieto, Rachel Joyce, Laura Sidal. Tem muita gente que já passou na mão dele. E ele é um cara que tem uma forma de abordagem muito legal para os atletas amadores, principalmente para aqueles que têm pouco tempo para treinar. Ele já tem mais de 1.000 atletas no age group com pódio em Kona, classificação para Kona, e classificações de pódio em categoria, em provas de Ironman e meio Ironman. Então é muito legal de ver a forma como ele aborda, as coisas que ele comenta aqui, delas que eu já citei no podcast, né, por informação que eu consegui através dele. Então acho que é um episódio que todo mundo vai gostar, principalmente quem é atleta e quem é técnico também, porque acho que tem muita coisa para a gente aprender aí com um cara do nível dele. Fala muito bem, né? Ele parece professor falando, então parece uma aula isso aqui. E na verdade foi uma aula, né? Então espero que todos gostem do episódio, curtem aí, aproveitem para ouvir, compartilhar com os amigos, comentar, participar do nosso podcast aqui, porque isso aqui é feito para vocês. Então sigam a gente lá no @trilados, no canal do YouTube, para a gente poder continuar fazendo isso daqui da melhor forma possível para vocês, beleza? Valeu, bom episódio para todo mundo. Hello, and welcome to another episode of TRILADOS. I am Beto Trini, and as always, I'm here with my good friend Fabio Carvalho. How are you, Fabio?
Hey Beto, how are you? Very good, very good. And
Well,
today we have been a
today,
awesome guy that with a lot of knowledge, so we
yes.
can share with you guys some good stuff.
Well, today we have another international guest, a former elite swimmer and a pro triathlete, exercise physiologist, world-class triathlon coach with more than 350 pro Ironman and Ironman 70.3 victories and podiums, coaching athletes, pro athletes like Chris Lieto, Tim Reed, Sam Appleton, Sarah Pianpiano, Rachel Joyce, and many others. Under his guidance, a lot of age groupers have reached their goals from finish a race, qualifying for Kona, or even become an Ironman world champion in their age group. He's also an author of a well-built triathlete and a fast-track triathlete, Ironman U master coach, and host of the amazing Purple Patch podcast that I've quoted so many times here in this podcast. So that's quite long, and no further ado, welcome to Trilados, Mr. Matt Dixon. How are you?
Good. Thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the bio there. It sounds almost impressive. I should point out the 350 wins and podiums. That certainly wasn't me. I wasn't that much of a great pro. It was the athletes I was coaching.
So you're part of the process.
Part of the process. So there you go.
Well, just to get our audience to get to know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started in your career in endurance sports, please.
Yeah, sure. So I live up in the Bay Area in San Francisco, California, but my accent probably gives it away that I'm not from California originally. I'm actually from England, and I came over many moons ago now. I came over to the States to swim at university over here. I was one of the wave of early international swimmers that we're all trying to make our Olympic team, basically. And I was tough. I had the work ethic, but my results never really matched the effort that I put in. I overtrained. It was very common at the time. And I was studying exercise physiology. I went on to go into swimming coaching, actually age group, and then at the collegiate level, which obviously the college system in America is big. That's where all the talent goes. And I was studying clinical physiology in my master's degree, and that's where I found triathlon. And I guess I'm a pretty slow learner because I took a similar approach that I did to my swimming with the help of some poor coaching. I overtrained, I underfueled, under-recovered. My pro career lasted about 4 or 5 years before it ended in chronic fatigue. And the only reason that I tell you that story is that was really the catalyst of when I moved into coaching pros, I really wanted them to not make the same mistakes that I had. And at the time, concepts like recovery were just seen as badges of weakness, and sleep and proper nutrition was always kind of an afterthought. Very few people were integrating strength training. And I just wanted my athletes to first be healthy, to try and build consistency so that they could have longevity. And it turned out that it was very much against the grain of the times, but that was really a catalyst of how my coaching career started, all of Purple Patch started. And I think in truth, the sport was ready to evolve, endurance sports. There was a paradigm shift occurring. I was one of the early voices in it for sure, but it was also a case of timing and the sport being ready to change. And then I got very, very lucky with a few of the athletes that I got to coach, that I got to almost experiment with, that had huge results, that really sort of had helped the sea change of how we now approach these sports that we all love.
Do you think people usually train too much?
The answer to that is it depends, because one of the things I don't like as a saying is less is more, because that's not true. More is more, as long as the more is effective training. And so I've always been well known of not really counting the hours of training that my athletes are doing over the course of the week, because we approach it at a different lens. We like to look at all of the stresses and demands that they have in life, and then look at the hours that they truly have available and try and optimize those hours. And that can change on a week-to-week basis, particularly someone that's time-starved. But with a professional athlete, the more I can train them, the better. But the key is that the training has to yield positive adaptations. The body will adapt, but it will either adapt by getting fitter, stronger, more powerful, or it will maladapt and you get injuries, accumulated fatigue, etc. And we see, I mean, particularly when I was starting coaching and over those first 5 to 10 years of working with pros, pros and amateurs were walking around in a fog of fatigue. They were training very hard, showing up to races and not having great performances consistently. It was almost a pandemic of note. And so, yeah, I don't think people do too much. I do think there is a tendency for people with very busy lives, families, professional, work that you have, to have a preconceived notion that you have to hit some number of training hours. And then they go about trying to ram those training hours into a life that's already overstretched. And they compromise on the things that make those lives effective. So they shorten sleep, they don't fuel and hydrate enough, and they end up with negative results. And so I always am hesitant. I know that's a long answer, but I'm always really hesitant to say, people train too much. It really depends. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, at the time also, they didn't have like the recovery sources. So they didn't have good supplements or good nutrition, and also didn't have gadgets to help them to measure their recovery, right?
No, they didn't. But I do think that, some of the, whether we're talking about supplements, I mean, most people have got access to really wholesome foods always. And I like to build nutrition around real food first, and then anything else is very incremental. But secondly, I think it starts with the mindset. And there was a prevailing mindset for many, many years, which still lingers on a little bit, that more is more. It's a tough guy's sport. It was very sort of 1970s that extended through into the 90s and 2000s of more is better, more is better. And so the mindset and the relationship with the recovery was, I better not say I'm tired. It's a sign of weakness. And if I can do more, it's better. And, like maybe we watched too much Rocky Balboa or something like that. But it was a mindset. So I think, yes, there is now more science wrapped around it. But I think the biggest shift comes in really basic, accessible things for everyone and how they view recovery as a catalyst to actually get more adaptations, more speed, more resilience, more fitness. And as soon as you come around the other side of recovery and look at it like that, that's where the greatness starts to emerge, whatever your own sort of level of greatness might be.
Yeah,
I can talk to by myself. For me, all my best races in long distance was the time that I trained less. So I trained like only 6 to 7 weeks, and I would go to the race and perform well. When the time I trained 12, 13, 14 weeks, I would come overcooked to the races.
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple of stories of that. First, a general theme, a pattern that I tend to see with a lot of athletes, where there's so much emphasis on the taper. And even that word originated from track and field, which is a very different sport, and has much less sort of leeway. You've got if you're sprinting 100 meters, you better be pretty darn fresh and on target. Versus on a race that lasts 8, 10, 12, 14 hours, you need to just show up really fit, but also fresh. And there's a much sort of, you've got a bigger landing zone. Let's call it that, a longer runway. And what I see a lot of people is they train until they're desperately tired. And then they're desperately trying to rest their way out of that deep fatigue, hoping they'll be great. And instead of that, like it's then been also a mental game, because many people do their best last big training 4 to 6 weeks before the event. And we have pretty short memories. So it's like, when was the last time that I rode any sort of over distance? And so rather than doing that, I much prefer athletes to train really well and maybe 3 or 4 weeks out have a block of deep recovery to get fresh, and then do a mini cycle of work into the race with just 72 hours of recovery where everything's familiar. You're not training. That's not your biggest training in that last 10 days or 2 weeks, but it still is, 3-4 hour bike rides and 90-minute runs that the body knows and the mind knows. And that's how to go there. And then Fabio, from just a story of a great sort of early example of doing less spread over a season, actually, was Chris Lieto, who I coached, who in 2009 was already world-class, was already great, arrived to me right at the end of his career. He was 38 when I started coaching him. And over the course of that year, I reduced his weekly training on average by about a third. So we did more intensity. I wanted to lean on the years that he had. So he had that base already. We reduced it. We integrated a lot more recovery along the way. We added caloric intake, 1,500 calories a day on average, eating more. And in the 2009 Ironman in race week, I knew he was fresh because he was already talking about, can we do Ironman Arizona, which is a month later? And I thought, if he's thinking that, he's not desperate for this to be over. And that was an amazing performance for him. He almost won the race. He got second. Yes. But the interesting thing, over the season, he actually accumulated more training hours than any other season because he was never injured. He never had forced fatigue. And that's the key, is that when you layer it and it's a part of life and it's integrated for a time-starved athlete, when it's integrated over many, many months, that's how you get ready. So reduce the hero moments. Some of them are good. Reduce the big, huge weeks every week with forced failures, and instead layer it over months and months, years and years, and then it's more fun. You show up better, you're more predictable. So that's the philosophy or the approach that's worked for us for so many years in a nutshell.
Yep. Matt, so a few weeks ago, we saw Lars Witter. It was an age group that goes under 8 hours in Ironman Hamburg, I believe. And he said that he trains only like 9 or 10 hours a week. And everybody are questioning this. And I always listen to the Purple Pet podcast, and you have shared a lot of athletes that you coach that train like 10 hours, 12 hours, or 9 hours a weekend, +5 for Kona, or get a world championship in Kona. So how do you manage to fit an Ironman on a 70.3 schedule, in a training schedule, in a week that are people that are already time started? So then how do you feel that this is
Yeah, well, first, that was an amazing performance. We've had 3 athletes go under, I've got it by memory, amateur athletes go under 8:24. So pretty good still. None of them training more than 10 hours a week. In fact, over the course of, if you look at all of the purple patch athletes, because we can measure it through the training platform, if we dissect the average Ironman athletes in purple patch, how many hours a week are they training on average? Now, we have some that train more because they have less life demands. We have some that train less, but the average is somewhere between 10 to 12 hours, exactly as you say. And we've qualified 1,500 athletes, more than that, to World Championship events, amateurs. So there's a lot of success that comes. The question is, how do you do that? And the key is what we don't do first is to take a training plan and force it on top of life. Instead, what we do is encourage athletes on a week-to-week basis, and obviously we help them as coaches, first look at life itself that is non-negotiable. What are your commitments with your family? What are your commitments with work? And you lay out the landscape of the week, and that gives you the sort of non-negotiables, the stuff that as an amateur, we should not be compromising. We want to show up for our kids, for our family, for our work. So that's the first building block. The second thing then is programming good quality, enough time for sleep, enough time to prepare and eat good meals, good time to actually have a bit of a social life. So just some time for yourself. And then what we have, and it's different by week, is a set number of hours left. And somebody that is a busy professional that might have a family, typically that is somewhere between 6 on the low end, 12 on the high end. And so if you're a half Ironman athlete, a lot of our athletes are doing 7, 8, 9 hours a week that are competitive. And then a lot of the amateurs, a lot of the Ironman athletes are doing 9, 10, 11, 12, because you have to do a certain number of hours to really be successful in an Ironman. That's just a fact of life. And so what we have is an optimization challenge. And to get there, we can't do the big miles. We can't just say we're going to build foundation. You're going to go out for 3 6-hour rides at low intensity, because it doesn't fit into life. So instead, we do more frequent high intensity training. And then the final thing that I think is important is we love athletes, if they can, and if it coordinates with family, to then look at certain weekends or clusters of days, or maybe a training camp environment where they can go away and do some over distance miles, where they can go and do that stuff, which is fun, is good for the mind and the confidence, and it's good for the body. So we might layer on 2, 3, 4 rides in a row, and they're planned and coordinated with their families, and they go from there. So that's the sort of spirit of how we go about it, I would say.
Yeah, that's good. I know a guy, a friend of mine, and he lives in Helsinki in Finland. And I was coaching him, and he lives like 30K away from Helsinki. So for him to go to swim is like a nightmare, because it takes like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And he's not a good swimmer, so he wouldn't shave much time doing a lot of practicing the swim. So I told him, like, don't swim. We go to the race, you don't swim at all, and then we bike and run a lot. And as he was an 11 hours Ironman, and then he did in 9:40.
Wow, that's impressive.
Without swimming, yeah, with no swim. Like, he swam 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then he rode 4:40 and ran 3:30. So yeah, you have to see the schedule of everybody and fit the training there.
Yeah, you have to think out of the box a little bit. Sometimes you have to be creative as a coach and as an athlete.
Yeah. Well, there's another phrase of yours that I like very much. That is a sports student become a second job. So the people who didn't need the obligation to do this workout and to show up every workout, and you need to reach these numbers at this workout. So and triathletes and competitive people, and we are used to this kind of metrics, and every day at work, me as a sales director, my everyday life is measured. So it's metrics. Every day I come to the office, I look at the metrics, at the sales and the orders and things like this. So how do you manage to your athletes doesn't be like slaves to this metrics, how to work, you need to work as those metrics?
Yeah, that saying that I like, the sport shouldn't become a second job. Some of that is born out of what we just talked about. And then also I think, and I'll get into the metrics in a second, but I think it's important for us to sort of align on what is success here. And whenever we take on an individual goal, let's just say we sign up for an Ironman, it's exciting and it's challenging and maybe a little scary, but it draws all of our attention in. That often people go and train for these, and it can become like a monkey on the back, like sitting on the back, and the other components of life end up getting compromised. So your relationships, how you show up in work, your health. And that to me is failure. Even if an athlete has a huge PR or qualifies to Hawaii or wins, that's not success. And so for us, we look at how can we get you to go faster, which actually isn't that complicated. Bizarrely, it takes some commitment and hard work, and you've got to be courageous and smart. But let's get speed, but also let's improve the other aspects of life. And so under there, how do metrics roll into this? And metrics are really good. So gadgets can be helpful. I've got an Oura ring on my finger. It gives me information that helps me with my conversation. Power meters give us an objective measurement. Heart rate give us an internal measure of internal stress and load. And so metrics can be very, very helpful. The problem is how athletes approach them, because what is equally helpful is what I call your inner animal, how you feel. And I think if there is one of the biggest differences between pro athletes that really understand their bodies and amateurs, pros tend to lean more on the courageous belief in how things feel and making decisions based on that, and then using metrics to help provide feedback and a framework. Amateurs, their big mistake is to become a slave to the number and think it's pass, fail. I have to hit this number or it's good. Using words like specificity and precision, and the belief that if you've got a week of training ahead and you've got 7 days of training, let's say there are 10 sessions in 7 days, that in order for it to be good, then at least 9 of them have got to be breakthrough sessions. And that's just a myth. Okay, here's the headline news. If you've got 100 workouts, you're going to have the vast majority of those being, pretty normal.
Right. Yeah.
Not horrific, but not amazing. Just good workouts, good, and they accumulate in the good. You're going to have a few that are an absolute disaster. You just feel terrible. You quote fail at them. There is no real failure. It's just like really bad. And you're going to have some that you really you remember and give you confidence because they're breakthrough, and that's great. But that's what great training is. The key is you do it consistently and you enjoy it when it's great and you don't overreact when it's not so good. And so within there, I tell you what, when I'm prescribing efforts to elite professional athletes, very rarely will I say, I want you to hit 350 watts. So I want you to go very, very strong. Let's see what's in there. And they would understand what that means. And so the metrics are good, but I always sort of compare it to, this is something I got from Dr. Stephen Seiler, who's a great physiologist. He said, it's like flying a plane and you've got a heads-up display. You're flying the plane. You're the athlete, but that's just information to help you paint the picture. It's like your instrument control, but you don't fly a plane by just looking down like this, So that's my thought on metrics.
Yeah, very good.
Well, Fabio,
No, you go.
No? Walk breaks. This is for me, it's a subject that I love very much, and I learned it from the Purple Patch podcast too, and I've embraced in my races, and I always have this mental that you should never walk in a race. It's a shame to walk. And a few years ago, I was listening to the podcast, and I have a half Ironman race, and I listened. That I decided to, since the beginning, I'm going to walk on every aid station. No more than 20 steps. But at every aid station, I stop, I drink my fluids, I eat, and then I start running again. So I realized that of course, there was some oscillation in my pace, but at the average, on average, my pace was faster than before. So I'd like you to say something about it, and if it works only for the lazy athletes like myself, or it works for full spectrum.
No, earlier I said one of my least favorite sayings is less is more. My other one is just don't walk. It's such a myth. Look, if we look at a professional half Ironman race, those folks are not taking walk breaks because they're running about an hour and 5 to an hour and 10 minutes. They're running very, very fast. So there's very few walk breaks in there. You go to the professional ranks in Ironman, particularly in Hawaii, there actually are quite a few walk breaks from people that have won the race as well, by the way. Chelsea Sodaro.
Dominated, yeah.
Where do you think Chelsea learned that? I coached Chelsea for 2 years, right up into the year before, and I'm good friends with her coach now, Dan, who's done a great job, obviously leading her to the world title. And I think he sees the world in the same way as me on this front. But we can be inspired by pros, but we don't want to replicate what they do always. And so what percentage of amateur athletes would benefit from walk breaks? 98% in an Ironman race, almost everyone. The key is to shift the relationship a little bit like recovery, where it's a tool, exactly what you said, Beto. It's a tool to go faster at the end. And so rather than seeing it as a sign of weakness, actually integrating them so that you can produce little variants, break a big problem down mentally into little projects, allow yourself to reset. And while you're doing that walk break, do something productive. So through an aid station is good because you're going to make sure that you do get the fuel and the hydration and everything you need. I've had just like at the recent New York Marathon in November, I had someone run 2 hours and 34 minutes, a 35-year-old amateur guy. He walked 6 times in that 2 hours. So it can be applicable to very, very fast people. But for most of us, if we're doing 3, 4, 5, 6 hour marathons, what you're reducing by starting walking, exactly what you did better early, is you're limiting the impact of the thing that undoes everyone in Ironman racing, which is muscular fatigue, mechanical fatigue. And most of us have felt it when we've done a marathon where we're not running out of our breath, our heart rate's not too high, but we look down and our legs won't behave. So if we can start early with the walk breaks, not when you're desperate, but strategically, then it's a great tool to add. And it just creates faster races. Yeah. And I guess the last thing I will add to it, the one thing that we do say with walk breaks that's very, very important is never walk going downhill because the speed penalty is great. So if you can, try and do it through aid stations, do it when there's a little bit of an uphill grade, and do it at a cadence, but before you get desperate and your form starts declining. That's my approach for
just for example,
towards the end of the run.
I raced a half Ironman here in Brazil in 2017 at Florianópolis, and I ran 1 hour and 43 minutes, and I didn't walk. I didn't walk once. In the year before, I raced a 1:31 half marathon, and I walked 8 times every aid station. So
there you go.
Yeah, and I think towards the end of the run, it helps, like as you said, in the head, in the mindset. You set little goals, so you just go. I just run to the other aid station, and it helps you to set the little goals and break the pain apart.
Imagine if you're 10K into a marathon, so you got 32K to go, and you're really struggling. That's an overwhelming problem. You know, that's like saying I'm trying to build a skyscraper and you've just got the little bricks in front of you. It's just overwhelming. But if you say, I'm really struggling right now, but I just need to get to the next aid station, which is at the 13K marker, let's make it up. Suddenly now your whole world shrinks and you say, I need to pace myself to the best ability that I can for 3K. And when I get there, I refresh, I get some sugar in the body, I reset to the next aid station or the next hill, etc. And so I think it's a great management tool. And then I think it's a great strategic tool of starting before you even have to. And that's where the bravery occurs. And I remember many years ago, you guys might know Matt Lieto, Chris's brother. I randomly spoke about both of them, but Matt was a good swimmer, a great cyclist, and not really a great runner relative to pros. And he'd always struggled in the marathon. And I said, you're going to walk every aid station at Ironman Canada. And he looked at me like he was crazy. And he came off the bike in, I think, third position, but tied with someone. And they were running about the same pace. And he got to the first aid station. He took a little walk break for 15 seconds and rehydrated. And the guy went ahead. And then gradually Matt called up and he got to the next aid station. He walked and the competitor just kept looking at him going, what are you doing? And obviously Matt is having this up and down. But when it got to 30 kilometers, Matt actually picked up the pace. His fastest last 10K was the last 10K. And he ran under 3 hours at Ironman Canada, and he got third place by 2 or 3 minutes. And his slowest kilometer was his last kilometer because he was celebrating and kissing kids and all of that because that's Matt. So
yeah, very good.
Matt, and I like to talk about some indoor training, like treadmills or indoor trainers, like Wahoo or things like this. I know that you have a special class at the Purple Pet Center Fitness in San Francisco, and I like to, especially in the time starter athletes, the indoor training are very time management tool for us. And how do you see this, and how do you work with this?
Yeah, I'm sitting here today in our center. Actually, I'm glad that we didn't start half an hour earlier because I was still sweating from a class that I was coaching this morning. And on this morning's class, we leverage a platform called Velocity, which is quite unbelievable. And it's not dissimilar in many ways to what we're doing now. It's two-way video. So I can have athletes from around the world seeing me coach them, which is helpful for technique, form, posture, cues, execution of the training. But I can also see you guys at home. And the platform actually controls your trainer if you have a smart trainer. So if you have a Tax or a Wahoo. And so we actually simulate terrain and we do proper intervals. And then I coach people through them. So today we had a Brazilian on there today, actually. We had a couple from Chile. We had a couple of Mexicans. We had people in London and England. We had New York. So it's a real global audience that can come in and get two-way feedback, which of course amplifies with team. But beyond sort of Purple Patch, that tool, I think, is so valuable for athletes if they leverage it correctly. And what I mean by that is that indoor training is obviously a really effective sort of maximal return of investment for your hour or your 90 minutes or your 2 hours. But when you're going to be there, if you really want to maximize it, you want to also bring slightly an outside mindset to it. And what I mean by that is that I see a lot of people on pictures or socials or anything, and they're riding with terrible posture, locked elbows, which is really bad for handling the bike, standing, cornering, things like that. And they're just sitting there and they're focused on what, how much power, versus it's a great venue when you don't have traffic, you don't have wind, that you can establish really good position, whether you're time trial or in road position, to be one with the bike. And then if you're on a really good platform, which I think there's only one that really does this well, which is that Velocity platform that we leverage, actually using the terrain and becoming smarter on how to get the best speed return for your effort. Because ultimately, triathlon is not about who can produce the most wattage. It's who goes fastest. Yeah. And so for every time I talk about this with a pro athlete, Fabio, obviously a pro athlete, they start smiling. Fabio, I saw you smiling because You know that when you ride a bike, and you know, I've seen you ride on the footage, but I've never seen you in person. But I know already that Fabio knows how to get the best speed return, how to manage his output over different terrain to get more out of his fitness. Unfortunately,
you want to go faster with a lower wattage.
Lower wattage, that's it. And it's the art of riding. And we work so hard to build our physiology, which is it takes a long time to change physiology and get fitter. Like you get a certain amount, but to reach a different level, you have to put so many hours in. And if you can become better at bike riding, the return is so much bigger and the speed is there. So when you see sort of these athletes that are doing amazing things, it's not just that they're generating much more power, it's that they're much better bike riders. And no one talks about it. People and the reason is it's relatively hard to coach remotely. So they just rely on metrics. And so that's where I really like to, like we've
and also coaching is not just throwing the workouts. It's managing how, as you said, is managing how they ride, is managing how they feel, how they sleep, how they recover, how they approach racing, and everything.
Everything, yeah. So it sort of comes back better to the metrics are great, and these trainers are great when you really leverage them to your benefit rather than allowing it just to be, you know, a hard workout, as it were.
Yeah, very good.
One last question that I had, you always say, I always listen, I believe that you said this at the Greg Bennett show, the coachable athlete. Well, what's a coachable athlete?
So you know, I've been lucky. I work with a lot of great athletes, and I've interestingly also, outside of pro athletes, work with a lot of leaders in business, a lot of CEOs and executives, and in their mindset, they're almost exactly the same. If you look at their traits and characteristics, they're very adaptable, they're resilient. But one of the things I always talk about is coachability, and the best athletes that I've worked with, the best leaders I've worked with, they are self-driven, they're driven by purpose, but they're also relatively humble internally. And what I mean by humble, like a lot of them have big egos, and that's great. I don't mind that at all. That can be a super, but they realize that for them to be the best, they want to rely on people that have wisdom and expertise and can also be a sounding board to help them. Because when you're doing the work, you're in the weeds, if you want to say that. So you're doing it every day. And it's very, very hard to put in the commitment on a day-to-day basis and also be able to come up and see and have perspective. And so someone that's really coachable, really it breaks down to this: being very, very good with communication, receiving information and applying it, but also giving feedback. And that's really important. Really good with collaboration and ensuring that you view coaching as a partnership and someone that is there not to tell you what to do, but to help you get to where you want to go. And that extends for anyone. And so I see that quite often. We've got examples in the current landscape of pro athletes where some of the least coachable people have not maximized their career because of that and could have changed the sport. And I think it's really good. And it's not reserved to pros or great leaders. We all can get better if we really lean in. And it's not about you giving up your journey. Like, it's not about giving up control and just saying, tell me what to do. I always thought I was coachable, but actually I wasn't a great coached athlete because I was almost like a puppy. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. And as soon as they told me what to do, I just did it. I just checked the box. It was that's not great coaching. That's just listening to someone. Great coaching is saying, this is my journey. I own it. And I'm going to use this person's wisdom and expertise to help me go where I want to go without giving up control. And that's what great coachability is, I think, to me. It's a great question. I haven't thought about it.
Well, just we are not almost wrapping up. So I like if you like to say a few words to finish. I would like to leave a message to all the Brazilian athletes and all the listeners. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time again. And it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. And I'll leave you with a few words to finish this.
Well, I want to say that when I raced pro as not too well, by the way, but I got to come down to Brazil and race in Brazil and spend some time in the country, and it is absolutely fabulous. And I was treated so well, and I had a pretty tough day, but it was my favorite Ironman experience I've ever had, and it was around the people. And I know there's just a massive triathlon culture. And so I just want to wish everyone the best of luck and enjoy the journey. One thing I didn't get to touch on today, but this should be fun. And so love it. Lean into teammates and friends. And if anyone wants to get connected with us, obviously you can follow us in the socials. We have an educational newsletter, but if anyone wants to reach out directly, I'm happy to have a conversation. Info@Purple Patch Fitness, and we'll take good care of you. I'm sure you can send some of the links in the show notes and stuff. But I really appreciate you guys as well. Thank you for having me, and it was great questions and a really good discussion.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. I hope you come back to Brazil again, and if you do, please get us a call, and we're gonna arrange some workouts to do and some beaches to visit you, some nice places to get. So Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.